I own 60% of this house. You need to leave. Now. Those words still echo in my head. Not my words, his. My husband of 7 years, looking at me like I was nothing but an inconvenience, a mistake to be corrected. The audacity of it all still makes my blood simmer. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I'd just finished a double shift at the hospital. 12 hours of being on my feet, comforting patients, administering medications, filling out charts. My back ached, and all I wanted was a hot shower and to collapse into bed. I remember thinking about whether I had enough energy to heat up the leftover pasta in the fridge. But when I pulled into our driveway, there was an unfamiliar car parked there, and another behind it. The lights in our living room were blazing, and I could see silhouettes moving around. For a moment, I wondered if I'd somehow gone to the wrong house. I walked in to find my in-laws' suitcases in the entryway. 3 large ones, not the kind you bring for a weekend visit. The sound of laughter drifted from the kitchen. My husband Richard's booming laugh, his mother's high-pitched giggle, his father's gruff chuckle. "Rich!" I called out, my voice echoing strangely in what suddenly felt like someone else's home. The laughter stopped abruptly. Richard appeared in the hallway, blocking my view of the kitchen. He wasn't smiling. In fact, I'd never seen that particular expression on his face before, a mixture of determination and something else. Something cold. "Alexandra," he said, not moving to hug me or even to fully enter the hallway. "We need to talk." He guided me to our home office, away from his parents, and closed the door. I remember noticing that my collection of medical textbooks had been moved from the desk to a box on the floor. "My parents are moving in," he announced without preamble. I blinked at him, certain I'd misheard. "For how long?" "Permanently. Dad's health isn't good, and they've sold their house." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "And you didn't think to discuss this with me first?" His face hardened. "I knew you'd make it difficult. You always do when it comes to my family. Because they've never respected me, Rich. Because your mother still introduces me as Richard's nurse friend after 7 years of marriage." I paused, trying to gather my thoughts. "Where would they even stay? We don't have a spare bedroom." That's when he said it. When he looked at me with those cold eyes and said, "I own 60% of this house. You need to leave. Now." I remember the way my knees nearly buckled, how I had to reach for the desk to steady myself. "What are you talking about? We bought this house together." "Check the deed," he said, sliding a document across the desk. "My parents contributed to the down payment, remember? They insisted their name be on the deed alongside mine. You only own 40%. I stared at the paper, memories rushing back. Yes, his parents had helped with the down payment. A wedding gift, they'd called it. I'd signed so many papers during that time. Had I missed this detail? Or had it been hidden from me? "This is our home," I whispered. "I've put every spare cent into renovating it." "And I appreciate that," he said, his tone suggesting anything but appreciation. "I'll give you a fair price for your 40%. My attorney has already drawn up the papers." He slid another document toward me. "You want to buy me out? Tonight?" My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "My parents need stability. Dad's treatments start next week at Memorial." He glanced at his watch. "I've packed some of your essentials. The rest we can sort out later." I looked past him to see my suitcase by the door. The same suitcase we'd taken on our honeymoon to Bali. "You packed my things? Without asking?" Something shifted inside me then. The shock began to crystallize into something harder, something with edges. "I even called Lisa," he continued, referring to my college roommate who lived across town. "She says you can stay with her until you find a place." My head was spinning. He'd planned all of this, called my friend, packed my bags, prepared legal documents, while I was at work, caring for other people's loved ones. "What about our marriage?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "We've been heading in different directions for a while now, Alex. You're always at work. We haven't had a real conversation in months. Because I've been covering for Sarah during her maternity leave. You knew this was temporary." He shrugged. "Maybe this is for the best. A clean break." A clean break. As if 7 years of marriage could be wiped away like a smudge on a window. I felt tears threatening, but but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Not when I could hear his mother humming in the kitchen, probably already planning where to put her hideous porcelain figurine collection. "If you think I'm going to just walk away from our home," I started. "Our lawyers can handle the details," he interrupted. "But my parents are tired from their drive. They need to settle in." In that moment, looking at this stranger who wore my husband's face, I realized something profound. He had never really seen me. He'd never understood what I was capable of. The hospital hadn't promoted me to head nurse because I was a pushover. "Fine," I said quietly. "I'll go tonight. But this isn't over, Richard." His relief was palpable. He'd expected a scene, tears, begging perhaps. His smugness only fueled the fire that was beginning to burn inside me. I took my suitcase and walked out without another word, passing his mother in the hallway. "Oh, Alexandra. Richard told us you volunteered to stay with a friend so we could have your room. So thoughtful of you." Her saccharine voice made my teeth ache. I simply smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes. The kind that promises something the recipient doesn't yet understand. "Good night, Judith," I said calmly. "Enjoy your stay." As I backed out of the driveway, I saw Richard watching from the window, his father's hand on his shoulder in a gesture of approval. 7 years of my life, dismissed in less than 20 minutes. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. No idea at all. Lisa's spare bedroom felt like a cell that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of my marriage, searching for signs I'd missed. Had Richard been planning this for months? Years? Was there someone else? Or was it simply that, when forced to choose between his wife and his parents, I didn't even merit consideration? "I don't understand," Lisa said the next morning, pouring me coffee in her cheerful yellow kitchen that suddenly seemed offensively bright. "You renovated that entire house. You designed the new kitchen. You landscaped the backyard yourself. Apparently that doesn't matter when your name is only on 40% of the deed," I replied, my voice hollow. "I called in sick today. I need to find a lawyer." Lisa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Use mine. Jackson's the best family attorney in the state." Jackson Barnes was indeed excellent, but his assessment wasn't what I wanted to hear. "Technically, the deed does give them the majority share," he explained in his office later that day. "But there are other factors to consider. You've invested significantly in improving the property. You've paid half the mortgage for years. And abandonment is a serious matter in a marriage." "He claims we've been growing apart," I said, the words bitter on my tongue. "Have you?" Jackson asked neutrally. I thought about it. We'd been busy, certainly. My promotion had meant longer hours temporarily. Richard's accounting firm had taken on new clients. But growing apart? No. At least, I hadn't thought so. "Last month was our anniversary," I said slowly. "He surprised me with tickets to see that Broadway show I'd been talking about. We had dinner at Antonio's afterward. He seemed happy." Jackson made a note. "Any signs of infidelity? Financial troubles?" "No, at least." I hesitated. "I don't think so. We have separate accounts, but a joint one for household expenses. He's always been private about his personal account." "We'll need to look into that," Jackson said. "In the meantime, I want you to gather any documentation of your contributions to the house. Receipts for renovations, evidence of mortgage payments, everything." As I left his office, my phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Had my attorney send papers to your work. Need signature by Friday for wire transfer of your equity. No, how are you? No, I'm sorry it came to this. Just business, as if we were dissolving a partnership rather than a marriage." I drove to the hospital, not to work but to clear out my locker. I needed my spare pair of scrubs and the emergency cash I kept there. As I walked through the staff entrance, I ran into Dr. Mitchell, the chief of surgery. "Alexandra, heard you were sick today. You look pale. Everything okay?" I'd worked with Dr. Mitchell for 5 years. He'd supported my promotion, trusted my judgment with patience. Before I knew what was happening, I was telling him everything. "My God," he said when I finished. I don't even have words." "I'll be fine," I said automatically, the same reassurance I gave anxious patients. "Of course you will," he agreed. "You're the most competent person in this building. But in the meantime, You need a proper place to stay. My mother's condo is empty. She's in Florida until September. It's yours if you want it. His kindness nearly broke me. I'd been holding myself together with pure determination, but genuine compassion threatened to crack my armor. Thank you, I managed to say. I might take you up on that. As I drove to the condo, my phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Harrington? This is Patricia from Cornerstone Bank. There seems to be an issue with your joint account that requires immediate attention. Could you come in today? The issue became clear as soon as I sat down with the bank manager. Richard had emptied our joint account, all $42,000 of it, the previous morning, before I'd even come home from my shift. He had every legal right, the manager explained apologetically. Both account holders have full access. Half of that money was mine, saved from bonuses, overtime shifts, the small inheritance from my grandmother, all gone. I sat in my car afterward, hands shaking on the steering wheel. This wasn't just about his parents needing a place to stay. This was methodical, calculated. He'd been planning this, preparing for it, while I was picking up extra shifts to save for the vacation we'd been discussing. He was figuring out how to erase me from his life. I called Jackson immediately. He cleaned out the joint account, I said without preamble. $42,000. Gone. That changes things, Jackson said, his voice hardening. That's acting in bad faith during a separation. We can use this. But the hits kept coming. When I arrived at Dr. Mitchell's mother's condo and finally checked my email, I found a message from our insurance company. Richard had removed me from our health insurance policy, another from our cell phone provider. My service would be discontinued at the end of the billing cycle. Systematically, he was cutting me out of every shared aspect of our lives. I called him, anger finally overwhelming shock. You took my savings, I said when he answered. Our savings, he corrected. For our future, which has changed. Half of that money was mine, Richard, earned by me. And half the mortgage payments over the years were made by me. Yet you're fighting over the house. Consider it a wash. His voice was so cold, so detached. My attorney says you haven't signed the papers yet. Your attorney can go to hell, I snapped. And so can you. I heard his mother's voice in the background asking who was calling. Then Richard's muffled response. No one important. No one important. After 7 years of marriage. After holding his hand through his sister's funeral, nursing him through pneumonia, supporting him when he was passed over for partner at his firm, I gave them everything I had. My love, my trust, my youth, my savings, and they discarded me like I was nothing. That night I couldn't sleep again. But this time, it wasn't shock keeping me awake. It was fury. Cold, clear, precise fury that sharpened my thoughts rather than clouding them. I got up and opened my laptop. If Richard thought he knew everything about me, about our life together, he was sorely mistaken. There were things he'd never bothered to learn, questions he'd never thought to ask, and that was going to be his downfall. By morning, I had a plan. Not a perfect one, but a starting point. First, I called my boss at the hospital. I need 2 weeks of my vacation time, starting now. Alexandra, what's going on? She asked, concern evident in her voice. This isn't like you. Family emergency, I said, the words tasting bitter. I promise I'll explain everything when I get back. With time secured, I made a list. Richard had always teased me about my lists, calling them excessive. But a good nurse knows that proper preparation prevents poor performance. My first stop was our safety deposit box. Thankfully, I'd kept my key. Inside were our important documents, birth certificates, passports, our marriage license, but also something Richard didn't know about, my grandfather's will. My grandfather had been a shrewd businessman with trust issues. When he died 5 years ago, he'd left each of his grandchildren a sealed letter with his attorney, to be opened only by us. Mine had contained a key and an address. The world takes advantage of trusting hearts, his letter had read. Keep this as your insurance policy against life's betrayals. The key led to another safety deposit box, this one at a small bank across town. Inside was a document transferring ownership of a piece of property to me. a lakeside cabin 2 hours north that had been in our family for generations. My grandfather had quietly put it in my name before his death, bypassing the family estate entirely. I'd never told Richard about it. Not because I was hiding it, but because the timing never seemed right. We'd discussed having a vacation property someday, but it had always been a someday kind of conversation. The cabin needed extensive renovations, and we'd been focused on our primary home. Now, I was grateful for my procrastination. My second stop was to see Jackson again, this time with a clearer head and specific questions. I need to know exactly what rights I have to the house, I said. Not just my equity stake, but considering I've been the primary person handling the renovations. Jackson leaned back in his chair. There's something called sweat equity in legal terms. If you can prove that your labor and expertise significantly increased the property value, you may be entitled to more than just your ownership percentage. I can prove it, I said confidently. I have before and after photos of every renovation, receipts for materials, even texts from Richard praising the work and showing it off to his colleagues. Excellent, Jackson nodded. Now about the joint account he emptied. I want to file for an emergency hearing, I interrupted. He's acting in bad faith, trying to force me into accepting a quick settlement while cutting off my access to funds. Jackson smiled slightly. You'd make a good attorney, Alexandra. Yes, we can request an emergency hearing and a temporary order preventing further financial maneuvers. As I left his office, I felt a familiar sensation, the same calm focus that descended when I had a critical patient. Time seemed to slow down. Details became sharper. Priorities arranged themselves clearly in my mind. My next call was to Jennifer Kwan, our realtor, and my friend long before she'd helped us find our house. Jen, I need your help and your discretion. Anything, she said immediately. I heard about Richard from Lisa. What a nightmare. I need to know what our house is actually worth in the current market. Not what it was worth when we bought it, but what it's worth now, after all the improvements. Jennifer didn't hesitate. I can have a comparative market analysis done by tomorrow. But off the top of my head, that neighborhood has appreciated at least 30% in the last 3 years. And your renovations? They'd add significant value. How significant? Your kitchen remodel alone probably added $50,000 to the value. The landscaping, the master bath renovation, we're talking serious equity. I felt a small spark of satisfaction. Perfect. And one more thing. I need to know who really owns my house. What do you mean? I need to see the actual deed and any lien records. Richard claims his parents are part owners, but I want to verify exactly how the ownership is structured. There was a pause. I can pull the property records. Give me a day. While I waited, I drove to the cabin. I hadn't been there in years, not since a brief visit after my grandfather's funeral. The narrow dirt road was overgrown, branches scraping against my car. The cabin itself stood solid but neglected. Weathered gray wood, shutters hanging askew, leaves clogging the gutters. Inside was musty but sound. No water damage. No evidence of animals having taken up residence, just dust and memories. My grandfather's fishing gear still hung on the wall. The bookshelf still held ancient paperbacks and board games with missing pieces. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Completely mine. I opened the windows to let in fresh air and sat on the sagging porch swing, formulating the next phase of my plan. Richard thought he had all the power because he controlled the money and had his name on more of the house. He thought I was just the dutiful wife who would accept whatever scraps he offered. He'd forgotten, or never recognized, that I was the granddaughter of Thomas Blackwood, a man who'd built a construction company from nothing and outmaneuvered developers twice his size. My phone rang. Jennifer. I pulled the records, she said without preamble, and something's not right. What do you mean? The deed is in 3 names, yours, Richard's, and his parents. But the ownership split is strange. You and Richard each own 40%. His parents together own 20%. I sat up straighter. Are you certain? Richard told me I only owned 40% and he and his parents owned 60%. He lied, Jennifer said flatly. I'm looking at the official county record right now. You and Richard have equal shares. His parents are minority owners. A cold smile spread across my face. Send me everything you have. Already done. And Alex? The current market value assessment came in. Your house is worth $680,000 now. You bought it for $450,000. I did the quick math. My 40% was worth $272,000, not the $180,000 Richard's offer had been based on. The pieces were falling into place. But I needed one more critical element. I called Dr. Mitchell. I need to ask a strange favor, I said. Does the hospital still use Harrington and Associates for their accounting? Yes, it's Richard's firm. Why? Is there any way to find out who specifically handles the hospital account? Without alerting Richard? There was a pause. What are you thinking, Alexandra? I'm thinking that 7 years as a nurse has taught me that the truth always comes out eventually. I just want to help it along. Dr. Mitchell sighed. I'll see what I can do. Discreetly. By evening, I had what I needed. The hospital's account was handled by a senior accountant named Marcus Wayland, Richard's mentor and the man who'd been blocking his path to partner for years. I sent Marcus an email requesting a brief meeting on a confidential matter. His response came within minutes. Mrs. Harrington, I've been hoping you would reach out. There are matters we should discuss. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., my office? I slept soundly that night for the first time since Richard had thrown me out. Not because I had all the answers, but because I finally understood the questions. Richard had underestimated me. He'd seen what he wanted to see. A hard-working nurse who trusted him to handle the finances, who believed in our partnership, who would never think to verify his claims or check the fine print. He'd forgotten that before I was his wife, I was a woman who'd put herself through nursing school while working full-time, who'd navigated hospital politics to earn a leadership position, who'd learned from her grandfather that trust was valuable, but verification was essential. As I drifted off to sleep in the cabin my grandfather had secretly secured for me, I couldn't help but wonder what other surprises awaited in this chess game Richard didn't even know we were playing. Marcus Wayland's office was exactly what you'd expect from a senior accountant. Meticulously organized, conservative furnishings, not a paper out of place. The man himself matched his environment. Precise, proper, measured. Mrs. Harrington, he greeted me, rising from behind his desk. Thank you for coming. Please call me Alexandra, I said, taking the offered seat. Alexandra. He nodded, adjusting his glasses. I'm going to be direct. I've been concerned about certain irregularities in your husband's work. My heart beat faster, but I kept my expression neutral. What kind of irregularities? Nothing criminal, Marcus clarified quickly, but ethically questionable, specifically regarding the hospital account. He pushed a folder across his desk. Richard has been artificially inflating billable hours, charging for work that was either unnecessary or never performed. The hospital has been overcharged approximately $42,000 over the past year, the exact amount that had been in our joint account, the money Richard had emptied before telling me to leave. I've been building a case to present to the partners, Marcus continued, but I wanted to speak with you first, given the personal complications. You mean, given that he's my husband? I said, my voice steady. Yes, though I understand there may be changes in that status. I raised an eyebrow. News travels fast. Small professional community, Marcus said with a slight shrug. Richard has been rather indiscreet, discussing personal matters in the office. My cheeks burned, imagining Richard sharing our private business with colleagues, painting himself as the long-suffering husband finally freeing himself from a neglectful wife. What exactly has he been saying? I asked. Marcus looked uncomfortable. That's not relevant to the professional matter at hand. It is to me. He sighed. He's characterized your separation as mutual, claims you were more dedicated to your career than your marriage, that you willingly surrendered your equity in your home because you recognized his greater contribution. I laughed, a short, harsh sound that seemed to startle Marcus. Interesting version of events. I opened my bag and withdrew the documents Jennifer had sent me. Did you know that Richard and I have equal ownership shares in our house? 40% each, with his parents holding 20%? Marcus frowned. That's not what he told the partners when seeking advice on the separation. No, I imagine it isn't. I slid Jennifer's market analysis across the desk. He's also undervaluing the property by nearly $250,000. Marcus studied the documents, his frown deepening. This is concerning. Combined with the billing irregularities, you said the overcharges totaled $42,000? I asked. Coincidentally, that's the exact amount Richard emptied from our joint savings account the day before telling me to leave our house. Marcus removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. Mrs. Harrington, Alexandra, what exactly are you asking of me? I leaned forward. I want two things. First, I want the truth about Richard's actions to be known to those who need to know it. Second, I want what's rightfully mine. And what do I get in return? The hospital as a continued client, I said simply. Dr. Mitchell is prepared to recommend switching accounting firms unless this situation is resolved appropriately. Marcus's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in his professional demeanor. I can present my findings to the partners today, he said after a moment. With your permission to include the personal financial aspects that intersect with the professional concerns. You have my permission, I said. And one more thing. I'd like to be present when Richard is confronted. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Jackson filed for the emergency hearing and served Richard with papers. Jennifer completed a formal appraisal of the house, and I reached out to my in-laws directly, something Richard never expected me to do. Judith, it's Alexandra, I said when she answered her phone. Oh, she sounded flustered. Richard isn't here right now. I'm calling to speak with you, actually, and Howard, about the house. There's nothing to discuss, she said, her voice cooling. Richard has explained everything. Has he explained that he lied about the ownership percentages? That you and Howard only own 20%, not 40%? That he's trying to buy me out at well below market value? Silence. I think we should meet, I continued. Just the three of us. There are some documents you should see. Judith agreed reluctantly to meet me at a coffee shop near my home. They arrived looking tense. Howard's health did indeed seem poor. He walked with a cane, and his breathing was labored. Thank you for coming, I said, gesturing to the documents on the table. I'll be brief. These are the official property records. As you can see, Richard and I each own 40% of the house. You and Howard together own 20%. They studied the papers, Howard's face darkening. This isn't what Richard told us. No, I imagine it isn't, I said. Just like he probably didn't tell you that he emptied our joint savings account, including my half of the money, before telling me to leave. Judith looked up sharply. He said you'd agreed to the financial arrangements. There was no agreement. I kept my voice level. There wasn't even a conversation. He ambushed me after a 12-hour shift, told me his parents were moving in, and that I needed to leave my own home immediately. Howard shifted uncomfortably. We were told you two had been discussing separation for months, that you preferred focusing on your career. I felt a stab of vindication. At least my in-laws had been deceived too. They hadn't been willing participants in my humiliation. I love my job, I acknowledged, but I also loved my husband. Until he proved he never really saw me at all. The final confrontation took place at Harrington and Associates in the main conference room. Richard arrived for what he thought was a routine meeting about the hospital account. His face, when he saw me sitting at the table between Marcus and the managing partner, was priceless. Shock, confusion, then rapidly dawning horror. What's going on? He asked, his voice tight. Please sit down, Richard, the managing partner said. We have some serious matters to discuss. Over the next hour, Richard's carefully constructed world collapsed. Marcus presented his findings on the billing irregularities. I presented the property records and bank statements. The managing partner presented the firm's decision. Richard would be suspended pending a full investigation and would repay the overcharged amounts immediately. This is ridiculous, Richard sputtered. It's all a misunderstanding. And my personal life has nothing to do with my work here. When you use client overcharges to fund your personal life, it becomes relevant, Marcus said coolly. And when you misrepresent ownership stakes to try to force your wife out of her rightful property, it speaks to character issues this firm cannot ignore, the managing partner added. Richard turned to me, eyes blazing. You did this. You turned them against me. No, Richard, I said calmly. You did this. I just made sure everyone knew the truth. As we left the meeting, Richard grabbed my arm in the hallway. You'll regret this, he hissed. You think you've won, but you have nothing. No home. No money. Actually, I interrupted, I have an emergency court order requiring you to deposit half of our joint savings back into an account in my name by 5 p.m. today. I have documentation proving my equal ownership of our house. And I have this. I handed him a letter from Jackson. What's this? He demanded. Notice that I'll be returning to our house tomorrow morning, with the sheriff if necessary. You and your parents can remain in the guest room and office temporarily, while we sort out next steps. But the master bedroom is mine. His face flushed deep red. You can't be serious. Deadly serious, I replied. Oh, and one more thing. I own a cabin on Lake Windermere. Free and clear. Something my grandfather left me. Just another thing you never bothered to learn about me. I walked away, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Not because I'd hurt Richard, though I couldn't deny a certain satisfaction, but because I'd reclaimed my power, my voice, my truth. The woman who walked back into her house the next morning wasn't the same one who had been forced out. That woman had been shocked, hurt, blindsided. This woman walked in with her head high, the sheriff behind her, and the law on her side. Richard and his parents were waiting in the living room, their faces a study in varied emotions. Anger, embarrassment, defeat. The guest room and office are yours for now, I said, placing my suitcase at the foot of the stairs. I'll be in the master bedroom. We can establish a schedule for shared spaces. This is absurd, Richard muttered. You're really going to live here while we're getting divorced? Until we reach a fair settlement, yes, I replied. Unless you'd prefer to move out and let your parents stay as my tenants. They'd need to pay rent, of course. The look of impotent rage on his face was answer enough. As I climbed the stairs to the bedroom we had once shared, I heard Judith's strained voice. Richard, you told us she had agreed to everything. You said it was all settled. I closed the door on his stammered excuses, sat on the edge of the bed, and finally allowed myself to smile. The game wasn't over, but for the first time, I was the one making the rules. Living with your soon-to-be ex-husband and his parents is not an experience I'd recommend. The tension was palpable, meals were taken in shifts, and the silence when we passed in hallways was deafening. But there was something empowering about refusing to be erased from my own life. After 2 excruciating weeks, Richard approached me in the kitchen one morning. His parents were at a doctor's appointment for Howard. Legitimate ones, I'd verified. This isn't working, he said, staring into his coffee cup rather than at me. No, it isn't, I agreed. I found an apartment, he continued. My parents can come with me? Or not? That's their decision. I nodded, waiting. Richard had never been good at apologies, but some small part of me still hoped for one. I've authorized the transfer of funds from the joint account, he said instead. Your full share. And I've instructed my attorney to work with Jackson on a fair division of assets. Progress. If not the emotional acknowledgement I'd secretly wanted. Thank you, I said simply. He finally looked up at me. I didn't think you'd fight back. Not like this. That's the problem, Richard. You never really saw me. Not completely. A flicker of something, regret, recognition, crossed his face. Maybe not. After he left, I sat alone in the kitchen. Our kitchen. The one I'd designed down to the last cabinet pull. For the first time since that awful night, I allowed myself to really feel the loss. Not just of my husband, but of the future I'd thought we were building. The children we'd planned to have. The growing old together. Grief hit me in waves, but didn't drown me. Each time I came up for air, I was a little stronger. Richard's parents decided to stay with me temporarily while looking for a senior living community nearby. An arrangement that shocked everyone, myself included. Howard and I have been talking, Judith said when she told me their decision. We didn't realize, that is, Richard presented things in a certain light. He's your son, I said. You believed him. Yes, but we should have asked questions. She hesitated. You've been more honest with us than he was. And Howard needs stability for his treatments. It was an odd truce, but it worked. Over the following weeks, as they found a suitable place and prepared to move, I came to understand them better. Their concern for Richard had blinded them, but they weren't the monsters I'd imagined in my darkest moments. The divorce proceeded with surprising smoothness once Richard accepted that his deceptions had been exposed. The house would be sold, the proceeds split according to our actual ownership percentages. My attorney ensured that my contributions to the renovations were properly valued. 6 months later, I stood in the empty house for the final time. The new owners would take possession the next day. A young couple, expecting their first child, full of plans and dreams for the space. I walked through each room, saying goodbye. The kitchen where I'd perfected my grandmother's lasagna recipe. The living room where we'd hosted game nights with friends. The bedroom where I'd slept alone those final weeks, reclaiming my independence one night at a time. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Ready for the housewarming party tomorrow? I smiled. After months of work, the cabin was renovated. Not into a showplace, but into a retreat that honored its history while meeting my needs. Grandfather would have approved of the changes. Practical, thoughtful, built to last. As I locked the front door of my old house for the last time, I felt a strange sense of gratitude. Not for the betrayal or the pain, but for what they had revealed. My own resilience. The true friends who had rallied around me. The strength I hadn't known I possessed. My new life wasn't what I'd planned. It was messier, more complicated, in some ways lonelier. But it was authentically mine. I drive to the cabin now on weekends, sometimes bringing friends, sometimes going alone. The solitude that once might have frightened me now feels like freedom. The empty space beside me no longer feels like absence, but possibility. Yesterday, I received an unexpected letter, a job offer from a prestigious hospital in the city nearest to the lake. Head of nursing, significant salary increase, opportunity to develop innovative patient care protocols. I haven't decided yet whether to accept. The choice is entirely mine, and there's a certain luxury in that uncertainty. Richard occasionally sends polite texts about administrative matters. His parents call every few weeks, a strange post-divorce relationship that would have been unimaginable a year ago. I hear he's dating someone from his office. I hope he sees her more clearly than he saw me. As for me, I'm learning to see myself through my own eyes rather than someone else's. To recognize my worth not in what I give to others, but in who I am at my core. The woman who was kicked out of her home that Tuesday night no longer exists. In her place stands someone stronger, wiser, more discerning with her trust, but no less capable of connection. Sometimes when I sit on the cabin's porch, watching the sun set over the lake my grandfather loved, I think about what he wrote in that letter years ago. The world takes advantage of trusting hearts. He wasn't wrong, but he missed something important. Trusting hearts also have the capacity to become fierce ones when betrayed. And sometimes, being kicked out of where you thought you belonged is the first step toward finding where you truly do. I wasn't the one who left, but I'm the one who found